Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SafeDefend Facebook Live. Of course, always remember you can catch us on SafeDefend YouTube and a lot of different places you can come back and re-listen to this. We're very happy to have Jeff Green, the founder and CEO of SafeDefend, joining us today. Jeffrey, how are you, brother?
Fantastic. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So, we're one of the things you and I were on the phone earlier this week. We were just talking about just stuff, right? Just the world and fixing all the world's problems, right? And of course, whenever you and I talk, seems like we always have conversations that come back around and end up talking about general safety, security. How can people stay safe, whether they're at their office, they're in a building, they're in a parking lot, they're at a social function, a sporting event, doesn't matter where they're at, church. Because unfortunately, as we've seen over the last several years, there's been active shooter situations in churches, there's been active shooter situations in public venues, there's been active shooter situations in businesses, active shooters in school, everywhere. So there's obviously, unfortunately, a real need to have these conversations. And I know in your line of work, obviously, you guys talk to a lot of people in a lot of different settings and situations. I know you guys work with business owners, you work with religious organizations, you work with private schools, you work with public schools,
Hospitals,
so just kind of, yeah. So, and I think I know sometimes the schools are the ones that get the most press, it seems like, for obvious reasons. Those are the ones that we seem to talk about the most. But unfortunately, we're in a society where immediate notification, being conscious of your surroundings, being situationally aware, all those things matter regardless of what the setting is. So I thought maybe today we could talk a little bit about that.
Actually, that's a great point, and that's something that really everyone should take to heart, and not just for an active shooter type situation, but just general safety. Situational awareness is really important. And it didn't get a lot of news, but we had 5 very serious active shooter events in about a 10-day time span here about 2 weeks ago. Pittsburgh, California, a couple in South Carolina, and one was at a kind of a bar district area, and when people were coming out, some individuals started shooting there. We had several different scenarios out in the public sector. Now, again, the likelihood of you encountering that type of situation is very rare, but being able to be protected and smart and understand, your situation, the area you're in is critical. And this applies just even walking out to your car after work. This applies to walking into the grocery store with your kids. This applies to, anything and everything.
Where you park if you're traveling. Where you, I don't mean to interrupt you, but where you park when you pull, if you're traveling with your family or you as an individual or whoever, you pull into a hotel, please do not park where there's no lighting. Correct. I mean, just basic, simple things. Number one, most likely what you're really going to prevent is somebody stealing something out of your car or damaging your car. But God forbid, if you park out in the far reaches of the parking lot because you don't want to get door dinged, and and there's no lighting, you are putting yourself in a potentially dangerous situation. So I think simple things, right? I mean, lighting, it's just, and it takes just a few seconds to just kind of look around, right? Just look around and be aware of your surroundings.
Well, absolutely. Once you enter any building, and part of our training, our trainers really highlight this aspect very well. Like, what's the first thing they say on an airplane when you got on? They tell you to fasten your seatbelt and where the exits are, right? You're on an airplane. When you walk into any building, any area, you should be looking just to see where the exits are. The best one may not be the one you came in. And that takes just seconds, but it does take some thought and some training and some conditioning to get your mind thinking, hey, look, let me just know where the exits are. And that could apply to a fire. That could apply to, any sort of situation where you need to get out quickly. So my kids get tired of me saying, hey, where are the exits when we walk into a place? Or, I don't get invited to lunch with them at school anymore, because every time I'd sit down, I'd be like, all right, where are we going to go if somebody comes in this way? their friends thought it was pretty cool, but yeah, it was apparently Dad was a little too embarrassing for
Well,
that. But, it's just that process of getting your mind thinking about just simple things that can put you in a much better situation to handle any situation that may come up. And again, this is well beyond an active shooter situation. This is really talking about just good best practice personal safety.
yeah, and I think that's the whole thing. Making yourself safe is about common sense, and also I've always said, Jeff, you got to trust your instincts.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you are, my wife, when we first started dating 4,000 years ago, she would always say that I would just instinctively, this back when I was in the military, I would instinctively, for example, if we were at a mall and a group of people were walking towards us, I would put myself, not even realizing it, I would, like, if I was holding her hand, I was on the right side and she was on the inside and they were coming from this side, I would, like, switch.
Right.
Just because,
You're such a gentleman.
Well, yeah. Well, she would tell you I just like to fight when I was younger. But anyway,
Right.
but I think it was really about, being, my job in the service, we were trained to look for things
Right.
and to scan areas and look for potential dangers. And, and I think you just have to be aware. And it's unfortunate, the schools, let's talk about this one for a second. Sitting in church I guess it's been probably about 2 years ago now down in Texas, where a gentleman comes in, nobody knew who he was. He's wearing the long, he's checking all the boxes for
Right.
somebody that you probably should be aware of. And they were aware of him because the second he stood up to do harm, remember, this is the one where the gentleman, there was armed security inside the facility. So, and that ended with the shooter being put down. I think what we don't have the benefit of having is, you never know, in big buildings, whether it's a commercial building, office building, or whatever, you don't know who's supposed to be there and who isn't, because they're coming and going. People are coming and going constantly, right?
Absolutely.
You don't have the benefit of knowing. We've talked about this in the past, where if we know, like with weather, in today's world, thank God, they can give a pretty good indicator,
Right.
like if a tornado is coming or if there's a hurricane coming.
Sure.
We can get information, we can get warned, you can take precautions, you can get away from the situation. That's not the case. I mean, most times. There was a situation here in Norman, Oklahoma 5 or 6 years ago, where a gentleman was just disgruntled with life and went into a business that happened to be a client of mine and held 3 or 4 people at gunpoint for 3 or 4 hours. Now, luckily it ended with nobody being hurt.
Right.
But we just don't know. And the crazy thing is nobody knew this was even going on for some time, because they had no way of notifying,
Right.
Authorities. And so this guy was in there for a couple hours before anybody even knew. So if he had wanted to do harm, if his goal was to do harm, he could have done all the harm in the world.
Absolutely. Might have been able to get away.
Those things.
Might have been able to get away. I mean, by the time anybody would even knew.
Yeah.
There's the old story, and who knows if it's true or not, but I fall back on it as a good lesson. The story of Wild Bill Hickok. Back in the day, playing cards, he would always sit with his back to the wall. And then that one time when he didn't sit with his back to the wall is the time he got shot.
That's right.
So how true that is, I don't know. But it really goes to the what you're talking about, what we're talking about here is it really comes down to you to be personally responsible first and foremost for your own safety. And you've got to put yourself in a position to make sure you can be in the safest position should something happen. And it's up to you first. Law enforcement is absolutely going to be the ones we want to get there and get if something really bad starts to happen. But we can't rely on them in those initial moments necessarily to be there. It's going to come down to you and as an individual, protecting your family, protecting yourself, whatever the case may be. And what can you do easily ahead of anything happening? And you know what? we hope and pray that nobody ever has to even use that skill set. But it is much better to be prepared and have it than need it, not have it. So,
and I think you look at let's stay on the active shooter thing for a second, right? Or just somebody with a weapon, and let's say it's in an office environment. If somebody is a disgruntled employee, we had a person down here in Oklahoma, God, it was just so horrific and terrible, that was actually decapitated by a previous. You remember that?
Yes.
And so this wasn't even the use of a weapon, or excuse me, of a firearm. I mean, it was, So the key is, and you talked about this a few seconds, in the best case scenario, law enforcement does a fabulous job. They do a fabulous job.
Right.
But they still have to get there. They still have to drive there. They still have to deal with traffic.
Get notified.
Get notified. All these things have to happen before they know they're needed.
Right.
And so you're still going to have a window of time where you've got to figure out a way to, run, fight, right? I mean, you got to figure out what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to figure out what are you going to do? Go ahead. And we were always taught in the service, the best thing you can do if somebody wants to come up, and not talking about it in a combat situation, but if you're just on the street, this applies. Somebody comes up and says they want to fight you. If you're not there to protect yourself, I mean, if you don't have to lay hands, the best weapon you can use are your feet to get the hell away from it.
Right. 100%.
I mean, especially when you get old like me, Jeff, it hurts too much. But you've got to really, I think, understand that law enforcement is going to do everything they can, but it's still going to take 15, 20 minutes in a lot of cases in Metro before somebody shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about it. Run, hide, fight has been the mantra for quite some time. And pretty much every training that exists, for best practices, includes that in some form or another, right? And again, that's not a linear response. So, it doesn't mean you run first, you hide second, and then you fight third. You may have
situational.
Absolutely. It is absolutely situational. Fighting, typically for most people, 99.9% of the people, is not going to be what they want to go to first. And that's what they shouldn't necessarily go to first. But God forbid if you get put in a situation, hopefully you're prepared to be able to protect yourself and others. But running, hiding, moving, getting yourself, knowing where the exits are, being able to work your way to where you've already scouted out, being able to get yourself out of harm's way, that's the most critical. And again, this doesn't have to apply to an active shooter situation. This can apply to somebody robbing a bank, somebody, or a store. We're seeing a huge uptick in kind of smash and grabs and robberies coming in. That doesn't mean necessarily they're coming to do harm to people, but you don't want to be in that environment when they come through. You want to be getting yourself out of that situation altogether. And because, who knows? It's a dynamic situation at that point. So, it really comes down to just training yourself to not necessarily be prepared to fight. That's not what we're saying. It may, God forbid, the smallest chance of circumstances be the necessary response.
Well, if somebody comes and puts hands on you trying to kill you, you kind of got to fight back.
You got to do that at that point.
But that is about the only scenario where you should be trying to engage.
Right.
That has nothing to do with being tough or having this bravado. I've told all my kids, I've got all boys, as you know, and they're all none of them are wallflowers. And I've told all of them, listen, if in today's world, you don't get out of a car and roll around and wrestle for a few minutes and then not hit each other and then get back there. Now you get out of the car and somebody shoots you.
Right.
I mean, it's a different world. So
people bring a gun
bringing
a gun to a car fight. Yeah.
But it should be absolutely your last option should be to try to engage in physical confrontation. Should be your last option.
And your best options are going to be that run and hide anyway. Really, really getting most people out of any situation. And again, this doesn't have to be the most violent scenario. This is any type of situation where harm is possible, whether it's grave harm or whether it's, injury, whatever the case may be. You need to be out of that situation. Running and hiding. And honestly, the favorite saying I have in training is the best place to be in this type of situation is somewhere else. So get yourself somewhere else. And again, but that takes some personal responsibility. That takes a little bit of training for yourself to just start thinking, being conscious when you walk in to say, hey, look, I'm just going to look where the exits are. I may have gone to the same grocery store for the last 10 years, but where are the exits? I guarantee most people couldn't name the exits other than probably the main doors.
Yeah.
So when you go in, you know what, you may be back by the meat counter. Hey, where could I go if something happened here? And this doesn't have to be it needs to be kind of a lifestyle, but it doesn't have to consume you. This is just quick. Hey, let me just think of, what's going to put myself in the best position to get home if something weird happens. Right. And that's all it takes. Then you go back to your shopping or go back to your, whatever, you're participating in. So we certainly don't want to convey that, you have to have this mentality that something bad is going to happen all the time. That is not what this is really the world should be about. You really shouldn't have to deal with thinking something bad is going to happen all the time. But it is much better to have just a little plan, a little preparation, a little forethought in place, because God forbid it is happening around the world frequently.
Well, and I think that's the whole deal, and your point's awesome. I hate the fact that when I get on an airplane, I have to take my shoes off, because the way my brain works, that means the terrorist won.
Right.
I mean, that's how my brain works. And I understand why they make you do it. I just hate it.
Right.
I just don't like it. And so, you can't live your life being scared to go everywhere or do anything, but you can take 2 seconds, like you said. You've given great examples today of just to be aware of your surroundings, be situationally aware is so important. If you'll do that one simple thing, if something does, God forbid, spin off, you're going to be so much more prepared to react in a way that's going to allow you to get away from the danger, to get away from the situation. Well, talk a little bit. Go ahead.
Let me give you a real life example.
Yeah.
One of our clients in Las Vegas is a credit union out there. And several of their employees went to the Route 91 concert on October 1st out in Las Vegas.
Yep.
They were there. We received calls and an email from one of their senior vice presidents that basically said, when things started going down, we started hearing the noise. I had people around me saying, oh, it's just part of the show. It's just part of the fireworks. I immediately grabbed the people I was with. We started heading for the exits. We started finding cover, getting out of there. That training that SafeDefend provided really made a difference in how we responded immediately. We didn't sit and wait for somebody else to respond before to give us that feedback that we needed to respond. They had already scouted out the exits. They had already had not necessarily a plan in place, but they were prepared, to be able to get themselves out of harm's way. And that is all we can ask from somebody. And, the SafeDefend training was a huge part. Now, might they have survived without it? Maybe, but they were definitely in a position to get themselves out of harm's way and get home and make sure that they were covered when a lot of other people were seriously injured or killed at that event. So, it's that understanding the situation you're in, where you're at, and how to get yourself out of that situation as safely as possible.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me the other day. They said, "Will you teach me how to safely use a firearm?" It's a friend. I said, "Yeah, we can go out and go shoot." And they said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Now you had?" He said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Oh, no." He said, "I've owned a weapon for us." When's the last time you shot? Oh, 9 years ago. And I'm thinking, do me a favor, just leave it at home.
Right.
Don't take it with you.
Right.
And the reason I bring that up is training. We've got to have a consistent. And I'm talking to everybody in the world, whether you're a business owner, the leader of a church group, anybody, superintendent of schools, doesn't matter who you are, right? If we're not training to these things, when God forbid it does happen, you're not going to know how to respond. You have to train. People watch a movie one time and they think that they're whoever the current action hero is. I used to always say Chuck Norris until I realized I'm getting really old. A lot of people don't know who that is, but you've got to you've got to train. It's not like what you see in the movies, guys. That's not how these situations are. I know the first time I ever heard I grew up in a rural area, as you know, so I've been around weapons and hunting and shooting and all that kind of stuff. So I'd heard gunfire before, but I hadn't really heard gunfire.
Right.
And I know the first time it sounds different when it's not coming from your weapon.
Right.
So the first time you hear that, I always say, well, smart people, the first reaction is they want to duck down and get cover, right? But once you do that, you've got to be, and again, that's why situational awareness is so important. You got to know, okay, what am I going to do now? Where am I going?
Right.
How can I get away from this? Where can I go? Where can I get cover? How can I put myself to where I can hide in a safe area until the good people come to eliminate the bad people and defuse the situation? And so training is so important, whether it's for the schools and all the different trainings we do there, if it's private business, all the trainings we do there, you've got to help put your people in a situation to where they can be safe and successful in a very high stressful scenario.
Absolutely. And so many people in these types of events, and the Route 91 is another perfect example. So many people rely on somebody else's response before they respond. And that can be deadly. And so, you've got to be prepared to make a decision on your own. Don't let somebody else wait to talk you out of a response. I would rather be, embarrassed by leaving a situation that really wasn't put me in harm's way than, sticking it out and waiting till people started really getting hurt, or, I myself got hurt before I even made a decision. So we rely too much on other people's evaluation of a scenario. And again, these are simple things you can do just with yourself, just saying, hey, look, if something sounds wrong, back to your point at the very beginning, if something feels wrong with somebody that I'm around, getting myself, away from that area, making that decision on my own. I'll tell you, the world there's just the United States, especially right now, there's just such an uptick in violence. And it seems random. It seems elevated. And I would much rather make sure I get home to my kids. I'd much rather put myself in a position that I'm out of that environment altogether, even if nothing happened, than the alternative.
Well, ego is the worst thing you can have when you're in a situation of violence. So, I mean, ego's gotten more people killed over the years, in my opinion, in scenarios that I've seen over the years, than anything else, because they now, I'm not saying, I mean, we've also heard the great stories where brave souls did incredible things that end up saving lives.
Sure.
Again, but it's situational awareness.
Yeah.
I remember the one where, that was very, it went viral. Everybody saw it, where the young man had a weapon, or I can't remember if it was a handgun or a knife or what, but the teacher knew this young person and just walked up to him, and just hugged him.
Absolutely.
And the kid just melted.
Yeah.
Because absolutely. He had a lot. And that's why, to be quite frank, you and I've talked about this, and I get mocked by this. And I'm going to tell you something. It really bothers me. People that I love and respect, that are friends of mine, have kind of roll their eyes when I say this. We have got to be doing mental health training, mental health.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have got to be doing this. It doesn't matter if we all walked 20 miles barefoot in the snow to get to school. Right. We all need to quit with that bravado crap. And we got to realize that whether it's a big deal to you or not, these kids, for example, in schools and people in workplaces that were isolated for basically 2 years.
Absolutely.
That had an effect on people.
Absolutely.
Whether it did you personally or not isn't the case. It did for a lot of people.
Well, and we're seeing the results of that.
Yes.
I mean,
I think already this year, how many active shooter situations have we had since February? 15, 16?
Yes. Yeah, easily.
I mean, we know of a client of yours that's they weren't active shooters, but they've had 3 assaults.
Yeah.
In basically a 30-day period.
2 weeks.
I mean, a 2-week period.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this stuff is not just happening, and we got to quit convincing ourselves that it's because of this or this. We got to start looking for solutions. And I think providing training to our folks, whether it's HR departments inside companies, to help them know how to better help their employees that have these challenges, that are going through things, or schools, or whatever it is, we've got to get out and get resources to people.
Well, the world is in a mental health crisis, without a doubt, and it's very much pandemic related. But there's also some political aspects. I mean, we're so divided. We're so divided as a country politically. There's just so many different ways we're getting pulled and stressed, and that we are truly in a mental health crisis. And one of the things we're working on right now is developing some support and training and ways to help allow schools, especially, but even in the private sector, just some strategies and techniques and ways to just help support employees, staff members, students, whatever the case may be. So that'll be rolling out with SafeDefend here, probably in the next couple of months. But it's a critical area, and it's really the foundation of everything we're talking about today. Is those issues are creating inappropriate responses, and which tends to be violent, can lead to a violent response. And you as an individual, as a parent, just walking in by yourself, the best thing you can do right now is get the mindset of it can't happen here out of your mind.
That's right.
Because it is going to happen there. Now, you may not be at that location when it happens, but it is going to happen. It's going to happen in your town. It is going to happen somewhere close to you. The kind of, not necessarily a joke, but the comment that we have anytime that there's an active shooter situation is the first person they put on the TV always says, well, we just couldn't believe it could happen here.
100% of the time.
100% of the time. And that is the first thing you ever hear from somebody. And with the elevation of risk that the country is under, you've got to be in the mindset that it can happen here. So let me just put myself in the best position. Again, I don't ever want someone to feel like they have to live their life in fear.
Right.
But we want you to live your life as long as you can.
Right. Well, I think just, it's about awareness. I mean, I know we keep saying that, but being situationally aware, we were talking to some friends this morning, Friday mornings early. I meet with a group of gentlemen, have breakfast, and some of the sons of some of our sons were there with their little group. They've got their little group they meet with, and I always tell our kids, you're just trying to be cool like your dads. But anyway, they take a guys trip. These young men are in their early to mid 30s, and there's a core group of them that go on a guys trip. And one of the gentlemen wasn't comfortable going out of country because he was concerned. So his suggestion was, well, why don't we go to, and I'm not going to name the city, but it was a city that is very well known to have about as much violence in it as anywhere in the world. Yeah. And we all just started laughing and said, oh yeah, boy, that's great. You picked so, and my point of saying that is there's this false sense.
Correct.
You can create this false sense of security to where you feel like you don't have to be, paying attention to these things, or you may go somewhere because you've been there multiple times. You let your guard down and you're like, well, I mean, I've been here, so I mean, everything's fine. It's just, and you just cannot do that. The number one, from my experience, what I've always believed and been taught over the years is the number one thing you can do to make yourself safe is to believe that it could happen to you.
Absolutely.
Not that it's going to, but you got to accept the fact that, hey, I'm going to this place. There's going to be a lot of human beings there. If you put a lot of human beings together, and then if you're at a venue where you add, alcohol, for example, that these inhibitions, start going away.
Definitely can escalate for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So you just got to be aware, and I love the fact that you brought this up a few times. This doesn't always have to be an active shooter situation we're talking about. It could be just how do you keep yourself and your family in the most safe possible place they can be.
Absolutely.
And so Jeff, we're going to wrap it up. We've been going for about 30 minutes today, and I appreciate you being here. I know you've agreed to come on with us a little bit more going forward, And I really want to, Dan Cole did a really good job one time we had him on here. Dan's not a big camera guy. He doesn't like the camera too much. So, but we'll work on getting Dan and
we'll work on him. We'll get him back on. Yeah,
yeah.
He does a nice job for sure.
Yeah, and I also really would like to have. I want to have Jeff Prothy come on one time too, because Jeff has so much knowledge on the infrastructure of helping to create a safe facility for your business, your school, your church, whatever it may be. But Jeff, thank you so much. Do not forget to do, if you haven't done already, go out today and get all the beautiful gifts and the flowers and plan good things for all the wonderful mothers out there. We love all of you and we appreciate you. And so, Jeffrey, if you haven't done that, go get that taken care of.
The world wouldn't be here without them. So
that's right. That's right. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We appreciate you guys. Join us next Friday, 9:30 Central Time. Again, you can go see the replay of this on YouTube, SafeDefend YouTube. But we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks so much.
You bet. Take care.
Take care.